Warning: the podcast you are about to listen to discusses films on the basis of the craft of screenwriting. It contains spoilers. Films discussed may also contain offensive content.
In this episode, we'll be discussing Ultraman Rising, released in 2024, and Unbroken, released in 2014.
Hey y'all, we are coming at you with episode 8 of Jay and Dave and Film School podcast.
Big round number, I think. The eight episodes under our belts.
We have a base 10 math system, so 10 is more round, but 8 is still round.
8 is very round. Have you ever seen 8? It's just two circles on top of each other.
The infinity symbol stood on its head.
And yeah, I think as we've been going on, I think we've actually been getting into a more consistent rhythm. Especially going into the new year now. We're recording this as the really early December, I believe, right? 4th.
Yeah, as we are here recording, we're on December 4th. So who knows what the world would look like to our future listeners. Maybe the whole world stage could be different.
I mean, I really hope that nothing too bad happens right now. I got all these Christmas gifts already wrapped up. Typically, right? Everybody kind of chills out for that Christmas few days, right? I mean, World War I got paused, World War II got paused. I'm assuming it happened in the Vietnam War and the Iraq War, where it's okay, it's Christmas time, let's take a break, and I get back to it literally December 26th.
I definitely remember that happening in World War I, and I think in World War II, but that would surprise me if it happened in Vietnam or Middle East anywhere.
Because it was European wars, those were. I don't know if the tradition of Christmas time being an era of peace really applied to the rest of the world.
Yeah, that was probably not as entrenched into the culture. But interesting that I guess Ukraine and Russia would both share some of that background. It's interesting because in one sense, they're kind of from a communist perspective, they're kind of anti-religious, and yet there's also a strong Orthodox Christian presence in Russia. I think that's in Ukraine as well. So it's probably a mixed bag. There would be some people on either side that would be celebrating Christmas, and some that would be not at all.
No, because I'm pretty sure that in the Ukrainian and also Russian traditions, even if it's not the traditional Christmas tree and all that, there probably still be just some holiday events that they'd probably want to take a break for. It just feels like you get to a point where you kind of have to look at the humans within war, which is why I like the fact that a couple of war movies actually featured the Christmas truce in World War II and all that. Because it's just nice to see that, every single person that's on a battlefield is a person that's lived a life and they have feelings and all that.
Well, it is very actually a powerful kind of scene. When that actually happened, it just tells you that this is the machinations of leadership in different countries that are sending these troops onto the battlefield, largely to their deaths, and they have their own lives and beliefs, and just kind of makes you put war into perspective.
Because when you do tackle war, especially just on film, there are really 3 kind of ways you can really go about it. It's touching on just the grandiose sheer, I guess, blockbuster scale of it. Just be here's some guys shooting each other, tanks exploding, whatever, right? There are many war films like that. And there's a lot of war films that kind of just deal with the human cost of war. Saving Private Ryan is probably one that comes to mind, definitely. Dunkirk especially. Mm-hmm. It's here's the actual humans within the really, really big battles and events that happen within these wars. And then I think there's kind of a synergy between both. I guess Dunkirk would also be a really good example of that, being the sheer blockbuster nature of what war is, plus the human cost of it, which I guess makes war movies popular because they're fun to watch, but also just emotional to watch as well.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things, I think, why horror is popular, in that you feel safe when you're watching it. It's very scary on screen, but you feel distanced from it. So it's actually a little bit comforting to watch something that like could happen way out there away from you, and you're glad that it's not happening to you at this moment, but to watch it happen somewhere else somehow makes you feel more comfortable.
Yeah, no, because like I'm kind of in the boat where I kind of like making fun of very dark things because I think it's just the way we kind of like move past it. Because like I know there's some people who look at some movies that like kind of treat war kind of funny, I guess, like very like dramatized and all that, and they kind of look at it with disdain. Like this is not like we're treating the soldiers wrong or they're not showing them the good light. But like I don't think every single war movie has to be extremely gritty. Like I'm really surprised that in the movie that I watched there were still like moments of like comedy and lightheartedness.
Yeah, I mean that would be part of putting human characters into any situation where we're complete human beings, which means we deal with things with that humor makes its entrance into various situations, even dark ones, which it makes for a well-rounded movie if you include that in your human characters.
Yeah, and I just think it'd just be just incredibly boring, right? If there was just dark and gritty this entire time, right? And I know there generally are just war movies that are like, okay, things are going wrong constantly and constantly and constantly. People are dying all over the place, and that's kind of just war. Which is, I guess it would be more equivalent to a documentary, if anything, because that is just the realistic nature of what happened. At the very nature of it, it is somehow it's been entertaining for a lot of people, and there's a lot of movies that are about it. And even if it's not just adaptations of World War II, there are a lot of people who just make fictional wars, right? Monsters versus aliens and, large-scale battles of that.
Did you mention your favorite two war movies there with Saving Private Ryan and Dunkirk?
Yeah, Dunkirk's up there, and then Saving Private Ryan because Tom Hanks is in it. That was really fun. I mean, I kind of have to make that argument that Forrest Gump is technically a war movie because it is Vietnam.
It would be hard-pressed to find it under the war genre classification, but...
Like, if you look at Forrest Gump as a series of short films, they collect an anthology, then the bit about Vietnam is one of my favorite war movies as well. Actually, now that I think about it, like, even Good Morning Vietnam, that's Robin Williams. That was a full comedy movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
So that's the other flip side of, like, touching on war, using it as a setting for other stories as well.
So those would probably be no other, like, battle scene war movies make your list?
Like, because the other, like, aspect of it, right, is, like, we're using World War II, again, like, as a setting, right? As a stage. Because that brings to mind superhero movies like Captain America or Wonder Woman that have them in World War One and I think World War II respectively. I think Wonder Woman was also in World War One during she was running around the trenches deflecting bullets with her wristbands. That's World War II technically speaking.
It's a war movie.
It's a war movie technically. Just that one scene.
Did you ever see Hacksaw Ridge?
I think I did.
So that's one of my favorites. On top of Saving Private Ryan and Dunkirk, those are also favorites. But I'm a big fan of Hacksaw Ridge as well because it's also a true story, an adaptation.
Oh yeah. Because I know the story of Hacksaw Ridge because it was. I forgot the religion, but like Presbyterian or something like that. It's like
the Seventh-day Adventist.
Seventh-day Adventist, right? And
which is like a mainline Protestant Christian denomination.
Oh, it wasn't that far off.
And he was very convinced, as many Christians are, that that one should not be active in causing someone physical harm, and so he couldn't raise a weapon in a war. And yet, he also didn't feel like he could let his country down by not going to war. So he decided to go, but not hold a gun and just be a medic. And he was right there on the battlefield, it's just a really unique situation because that I don't think has happened too often. And he ended up saving tons of lives just by dragging people to safety, injured people. And I think got a medal for it, I think.
Yeah, and like it wasn't just like okay, moving one guy to cover. It was Hacksaw Ridge. He was on like the top of a cliff. The Allied forces came in at a very low point of the bridge, the beach. They set up a net on the cliffside, and the way to actually get back to safety was actually dragging them all the way back to this cliffside. So not only was he dragging them back, he had to actually like rope and pulley them down to safety.
That's right. Yeah, it was pretty extreme.
So it was both like a labor of incredible physical strength and incredible bravery
And sacrifice.
and
Like
sacrifice.
he could have been killed because it was an active battlefield
Yeah,
when he was doing this, and I think he saved like 70 some people's lives. I think.
honestly, he's a brilliant man, and more people should just watch Hacksaw Ridge to just actually see that be a real thing.
It certainly gets into some theology as well, which I'm kind of more from that same perspective. At least traditionally, I come from Mennonite background, which is a denomination that upholds that same view. But I also believe that countries have a calling or a demanded of countries leadership to protect their own people and even protect the world in a right way. There's lots of examples of it being done in a wrong way, but that there should be proper use of military force when it's called for to make the world safer.
The whole idea behind standing armies is like, history has shown if you don't have one, then you're going to get visited by one, and then you're no longer going to have a country. So it's both a deterrent as well as like an active protective force. Yeah, I do kind of agree that once peacetime happens, soldiers do get transitions over to more public service roles, just to use like pure raw manpower to do things. I know when like natural disasters happen, like one of the first things that the government ships in are just truckloads of soldiers to like build sandbags and like move lumber. I think most soldiers actually get more satisfaction out of like doing that, like directly saving people's lives and taking them.
Yeah, it's almost like a slippery slope, like morally, personally, if you're put into that role. Because what if you start enjoying it? Like then that's a problem.
Yeah.
You wanna protect your country and the people around you, but it shouldn't be about taking any pleasure in that kind of action.
Did Full Metal Jacket? That's the other one that comes to mind. Did Full Metal Jacket touch on like going super into just like the killing in war?
I'm trying to think if I've seen that one. I think I'm getting it mixed up with a different one. I don't think I've seen Full Metal Jacket.
Because the one that definitely did touch on that was the legal movie I watched a while ago. Dude, I had to look at my Letterboxd review for it, but it was the one where the famous Jack Nicholson line came from. You're damn right, I ordered a code red, or you can't handle the truth. That's it.
Oh, A Few Good Men.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's one I definitely think maybe touched on just like military culture in terms of like, doing things for your country and honor and glory. Yeah, I mean, nothing really touched more, I guess, like representation to like military culture and then killing on behalf of like your government or your country than I guess the Japanese Empire during World War II. When we look at like World War II, like there's those, I guess, the big three Axis powers, and like we normally focus on the Western side of it and like kind of like their beliefs. But like the Japanese were pretty brutal in like terms of like the stuff that they did and believed in. Every single movie that they're kind of in with like World War II, that's always like the main characterization of them, that they were like ruthless and almost lacking of empathy, which is kind of crazy. Because like they turned it around like super fast after the war ended.
Yeah, well, the losing side that kind of shows them and their people that, I mean, whether or not everyone changes their beliefs, it should show that the world's not going to stand for that belief, whatever it was that made you go out and do what you did. So, I mean, same with Germany, that there was a big change on the world stage after they got beat in World War II, and basically the next generation, all like not all, because there's pockets of all beliefs that would have remained, but they basically resented the previous generation and didn't want to be that way anymore.
Yeah, and I guess you could make the assumption that the same thing will happen for the current wars. Whoever loses, which I guess would have to be the aggressors, because that's what historically has happened for the past couple wars.
We'd be going over old news by the time this comes out.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope and pray there'll be a resolution, and it seems like with Trump getting in power that he might be able to speed a resolution. And I mean, one of the headlines I just recently saw is that Zelensky was saying that if the unoccupied region of Ukraine comes into NATO, that he might be content with that and kind of give up those other two regions, which would be, I mean, that would almost seem like something that both sides could agree on. Although I don't know which Putin is more like serious about keeping those two regions or Ukraine not being in NATO. I don't know which he would value more.
For like really long time peace to actually last, it would have to be Ukraine has to maintain all of its border that it originally had, because what would happen then would be either East-West Germany type situation in terms of like the Ukraine people still there, or like the current North and South Korea thing that's happening right now, where we just divide them around the DMZ, and it just becomes like a pocket of more conflict whenever we want to touch on that. But I guess for us as filmmakers, would you want to write the inevitable Russia-Ukraine dramatization autobiography adaptations that are going to come out of this?
I mean, I'm up for writing anything. I think it would be a fascinating setting to write a film. If a producer wants to pay me to do that, I'm there.
Because like even for me, like I guess it would just be like a matter of research to actually do it right and give it justice, right? Like,
yeah, and it would be a lot of research, and I mean, it's one that, as we kind of touched on before, like there's kind of a belief that goes deep that each side is right, and that brings up some interesting dynamics in what you'd bring about in the drama. That's always makes the best drama when there's conflict that is complex.
but like we go the other way around. It's not like a full war movie. Would you ever want to like set like a single scene in like the Russia-Ukraine war? Because yeah, there are movies that just, you know, like I said, like Captain America and Wonder Woman, that just use it briefly as a place he goes to prove bravery or honor or whatever. I feel like if I were to write a movie that was set during like 2021 in like the European world, I think it would be cool to have like them drive past or acknowledge that the war is happening, both in terms of like establishing a time period, but also getting like a pretty good way to like actually get characterization in, to actually see like an opinion on, you know, either they have like a political opinion or a moral opinion, or they have no opinion at all. It'd be kind of interesting.
I mean, it would also be a challenge in like, because you still want to have a stance in a film, even though you're showing complexity. And so I would still want to be careful, because I mean, I do think Russia is the aggressor in this situation. Even though people on the ground sort of have thoughts about why it's right, you know, there's kind of like this dynamic of deception, even from the high coming down to the people, and then you get them kind of believing something that's not true and stuff like that. So it would definitely be dramatic.
It's like, it'd be cool. I don't know how it would land with future audiences to be like, here's a movie about a person who's like pro-Russia during like, even like post like Russia-Ukraine. Like that's just part of his characterization. He was always pro-Russia. Like, I don't know if that movie got like a lot of hate just because that character existed, or it'd be like really interesting to watch, to see like a very different opinion on screen. Of course, like going toe to toe with like an opposing opinion or something like that.
Well, I think you would almost have to do it, because I mean, I don't think that, I mean, in this situation, maybe there's different ones in history. If you asked any of the soldiers, or maybe the commanders anyway, that, you know, they're doing good in the world by whatever they're doing in this war, and so then right away you've got characters that have complexity in their stance on what they're doing.
Because the other like kind of war movies I like watching are like the post-war movies, where it's like the soldier coming out of battle. And like I was tempted to actually watch the sequel to Unbroken, where it actually touches on Zamperini's like conversion to like religion fully, and like the stuff he did after war. I was just turned off by it because it actually was a lower budget without any like most of the original cast not coming back for it. So I don't know if I want to like, you know, watch something that I don't think is that good.
Yeah, I've got it. I've always been planning to watch it. I haven't yet, but I'm going to at some point, just because I really like Unbroken. So it's kind of just a extension of the story. So I'm curious.
Well, let me know how that goes, because yeah, a little bit suspicious about it. But that being said, I think it's kind of cool to just have characters that do have soldier or war backgrounds outside of war movies. It's just like, not like you can always deal with the stories like PTSD and all that, but they have like really inherent skills like, combat abilities and shooting abilities and, physical strength. Seeing a person that actually has been through it doing kind of like normal things is honestly actually kind of surprising to me, just to know that those people exist. Because even with Zamperini's story, like learning that Zamperini went on to become a minister and all that was pretty cool. Or not minister, but preacher. Oh no, he became a runner again and went back to Japan and participated in the Olympics as torchbearer. That was cool to see that he was still doing good for himself.
Yeah, and we're kind of getting into our movie discussion here, but I mean, it was such a cool journey to see him take that step of forgiveness. Like it was really a big because of what the Japanese army did to him when he was a POW was really bad. Was just horrendous, kind of, and yet he was, as he said, he became a man of faith, and he had the conviction that he had to forgive. And then he practically went and did that during that Olympics in '88, was it? No.
I think it was 88 Tokyo Olympics.
Right, because that was back when Olympics, summer and winter, were in the same year. Because winter was definitely '88. But because it was in Calgary and I went there.
Oh,
but I think it was in the that was still when they were in the same year, so it could have been. I forget where the summer was there, but
yeah, no, it's the turnaround of Zamperini that, again, pretty just inspiring to watch, because that whole, like, when you watch that movie, it's just him. It just really is just bad thing after bad thing after bad thing after worst thing, and he's still going strong. I don't know if it was because of his conversion to faith that he's having on the lifeboat, or the fact that he was meeting new people and was kind of feeling like that camaraderie or whatever. Yeah, like that one scene where he's just holding a plank above his head. That was the moment I was locked into that movie. Just literally just being with the silence of everybody. It was right. Crazy to watch. I guess on the flip side, right, the antagonist was the Japanese again. It was the story is that the real life story of how Zamperini kind of crash landed in. I always get the oceans mixed up. The Pacific Ocean? It's the Pacific, yeah. Pacific Ocean, yeah. Right? And then he gets picked up by the Japanese and gets locked in an internment camp in not Osaka. Jeez, I forgot. It's a really Aomori, which honestly, actually, a different story about that. Aomori plays a really, really tough prison. Fascinating story about a Japanese escape artist who just kept escaping from different high security prisons that you could try looking into. There's an animated series on YouTube that I watched, just a documentary, which again is another fun tangent. It's actually great that movies like World War movies do exist, because it's just a fun way to learn about history in like an entertaining way. I think there's a lot of people who actually do come out of war movies like learning not only about the human cost, but like stuff like, oh, this is how a tank works, or like this is how like battle plans work out. That I think it's just like, I don't know, not good to know, but like cool to know.
Well, the more details you have about the setting of whatever movie you're watching, it just immerses you more. It's actually, I mean, something I try to do in a script is add those details. I'm sure you do too.
Because like if I just learn a fun fact and like it relates to my movie in some way, I'll totally just include that in there. If not for me, then for the people who will go into my movie and be like, how real is this movie really? Let's look at it. Like, it's kind of for them as well. But yeah, going back to Unbroken, the Japanese forces in there were fully characterized as like completely evil. There were no like soldiers in there like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. No greater antagonist was the general, the bird, I believe he was called in the movie. The cool thing is, like, in the real life story, Zamperini, when he did go back to Tokyo, he wanted to meet the bird, who at that point was he wasn't a convicted war criminal.
80s or 90s, right?
Yeah, it was 80s or 90s, right? He was, during the World War II, General Douglas MacArthur was searching for like him as a war criminal to like full on prosecute, but he was sneaky. He was hiding up in the mountains for like a couple of years, And it wasn't until like the U.S. granted him amnesty in order to like repair relationships between them and Japan that he actually came out of hiding. A man who did like all these incredibly cruel things to a bunch of people, ended up becoming a very successful insurance salesman. It's crazy just how much that turnaround could have been, beating people's faces into selling them health insurance. Like,
Yeah, I guess what what you have to do after war. Gotta find something.
yeah, going back to it, like Zamperini, when he did go back to Tokyo for the Olympics, he wanted to actually beat just the biggest bad in his life, the guy who actually caused him nightmares, and literally grant him forgiveness. But the bird, despite actually meeting with the news crew 60 Minutes and talking about his experiences with war and kind of the fact that he's kind of unremorseful about it because he was doing it for his country, he refused to meet with Zamperini at all, and he died never meeting him, which is, I don't know, it's kind of cowardly. It kind of says a lot about the character that was shown in the movie, that, you know, he was just a small, tiny baby child.
Yeah, he's someone that, I mean, again, not knowing exactly how the interaction went down, but he did seem to take enjoyment of it. At least that's how it came across in the movie. Even though he was doing stuff for his country, he took enjoyment in the harming of humans. So that's a really kind of corrupting path that he took into himself. And yeah, I mean, it's sad when forgiveness is offered and then it's rejected.
Yeah.
That's just a sad human drama situation.
I also like analyzing the feats of villain scenes in many pieces of movies. You know, just the moment the antagonist like fully either dies or fails or gets arrested or whatever. And I think in that movie, they were setting up, like, you know, an assassination ploy of the bird, right? With all the prisoners presenting him and stuff like that. And even Zamperini has that moment of, like, I'm going to fully strangle this guy. But it doesn't. His villain defeat actually, I think, comes in the form of, like, a loss of, like, respect of all the prisoners and even some of his guards as well. Which I think is a fitting defeat for a character like that, which is fueled purely on ego and ego alone. But I really like that scene that they did show, like, Zamperini's forgiveness of him, because at the end, when they do get rescued by the Allies, he does go up to, I guess, the bird's bedroom, and I guess with the intention of forgiving him, but he sees that he's gone, and he kind of just sits down and just reminisces on everything, which is cool. It's a nice touch to it. Very subtly done.
Probably was a challenge for the screenwriter who adapted it. Again, I haven't read the book, so that might have been in the book, but I'm sure they wanted to touch on that attitude of forgiveness during the film, whether or not, if that scene actually happened. It might have been one, I'm just conjecturing here, but it might have been one that was added to demonstrate his desire to offer forgiveness. And fit it into the movie, because that drama where he went to Tokyo, that was years and years later, where he went with the Olympics.
Which honestly, I kind of find it a little bit of a shame to not really touch on Zamperini's forgiveness near the end of that movie. It was kind of really just tacked on with that kind of like the documentary part of it, because it does end with just him going back to the States and reuniting with his parents. It's a really nice feeling, but we don't really see like that change in his character.
Yeah, it's almost like they didn't have full time to develop that, like, because they were most of the movie was just showing what happened, what he went through, and all that ordeal of like torture. And so it's, I mean, maybe there would have been a way, like, that's kind of a question, like, if you were to prepare to adapt a movie where there was a lot of just tough stuff that someone went through, and then later kind of decided to forgive the people who did that to him.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Because, like, I think the way they did it was actually through just that lack of inaction, right? Like, he never laid his hands on a guard. He never tried to go escaping. He never spoke back to them or cussed them out or whatever, right? Even when he was captured by, like, the Japanese initially and, like, locked up in that cell, he never... I don't think he tried fighting back. I think he struggled a little bit, but he never, like, punched him or anything. Yeah, like, despite it, like, it was, like, just... It was the movie and resilience. It was just...
And it kind of, in a sense, showing that was kind of an act of forgiveness in itself, because he's treating his enemies better than they're treating him. which is kind of against the grain for human nature. It exemplifies his character moment in when he was on the sea and he had that moment with God where he says he'll forget exactly what he says, but he basically promises to follow him, and then he had to live that out. He got kind of put in a situation that was going to test that commitment, and he came out kind of having stood tall and keep maintaining his commitment.
Actually, I'm trying to look back at it. I forgot what role Zamperini had on the airplane, but I actually don't think we've ever seen in the entirety of the movie Zamperini actually taking the life of another person or laying his hands on them. Like, I have to look it up again. Like, was Zamperini the pilot?
I can't remember.
I'd have to assume he wasn't the gunner. He must have been like a loader or something. But he
keep in mind, like, he only made this decision to follow God when he was on a raft on the ocean for months. I think he was on that raft for more than 30 days. And so before that, I mean, I'm assuming he was just a regular dude.
So I guess there must have been like some scenes that they cut out where it actually shows Zamperini going through firearms training at least or something like that. Because again, he actually no, I do remember that when he was trying to escape from the sinking plane, he was trying to rip one of the mounted machine guns off as a method of defense, but couldn't do it. So I guess he was prepared to shoot people at that point in time still.
Yeah, no, he definitely had a change. It's an example of someone who has maybe a change early. That's his new situation. And then it was, of course, going to be tested. And then he still kind of had to come out being transformed in the sense that, was he going to stay true to his commitment or wasn't he? And he did. I
guess that must just be like my one big critique with that movie. It's just not really playing out that character change just well enough. Because I think they could have just done it by just instead of showing the documentary of Zamperini running through the Tokyo Olympics with that saved archive footage,
kind of like maybe doing a scene, like a dramatized scene of that later.
Like I'm thinking like, you know, Discovery Channel-esque like a recreation of it.
Well, you know, that had the bird accepted that offer of meeting him and receiving forgiveness, that definitely would have been a moment that would have been in that movie to final, like to be the conclusion.
No, 100%.
But of course that didn't happen, so then they had to kind of that would be too much of a change.
I think so.
As an adaptation, changing the script or the story, that would be way too much.
I guess, you know, props on the adaptation people for not just writing that in for the sake of dramatic storytelling, that they're staying as close to the real event as possible. Because I feel like if I was in the position, I would be like, I know it didn't happen, but what if it did? You know, for the sake of the audience. Let me think, but because like there was a couple moments where I kind of felt like it felt amazing. Like I honestly wanted to give it 5 stars, but it kind of did feel like it was just like not Hacksaw Ridge, but what was the one I'm thinking about? Shawshank Redemption, right? It's like a prison movie without the prison escape scene. It was just kind of a series of really unfortunate events happening to a guy. And I guess that is the point of the movie, to show, like, despite everything he's going through, he is unbroken.
Yeah, I mean, in any movie, we want to put our main characters through the toughest kind of gauntlet that you can give them the most challenge. And I mean, this was true for this character. He went through challenge throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's he had a different way to go through it and a different transformation, but it was still there.
The way I kind of felt sometimes during the movie is like they're building up to a really, really big battle or of some variety, right? Where the prisoners do end up escaping, or, you know, Zamperini does pick up a weapon or something like that. Like, even when the scene happens when they're leading, the Japanese are leading all the prisoners of the coal mine into the river to what I would assumedly think is to shoot them. I really thought it was going to be like a full-on, like, turning on the captors type scene, but it didn't happen. And I don't know if I'm kind of disappointed by that, just because of the sheer blockbuster way they opened up the beginning with, like, the plane crash scene, and, like, the use of CGI as well with the storm scene in the raft. Because it does get really quiet as you get further onto the movie. It changes all that action for, I guess, thinking introspectively, and, again, just seeing how much fluff this guy can go through without breaking, I suppose.
So you would have liked to have seen a uprising by the prisoners?
No. It's not that. It's just it's what I came to expect when it came to war movies like that, where it's the human spirit doing things. Like it's just kind of something I've kind of found synonymous with it.
Yeah, well, and that's where this movie and this story is just a different story of how that human strength gets applied. Instead of the strength being applied to fight back against oppression, it was still a fighting back against oppression, but it was done through pacifism, through showing I'm not gonna like disrespect you or like hate you for what you're doing for me to me. I'm going to basically fight back through non-resistance.
I think if I were to recommend the movie to a person who loves war movies, I'd have to tell them it's different. It's a lot different than a lot of the other war movies you may come to expect. It's not about the combat as opposed to, I guess, the human. In more a way than Saving Private Ryan or Dunkirk touched on it. I enjoyed it. I was watching it while doing something else, and I can tell you that pretty much like after the opening intro scene, I was fully locked in that entire way. So,
I love that you always start by like doing something else,
yeah.
and these movies grip you, and that's a telling sign. So I'm obviously picking good ones.
Yeah, I'm telling you, dude. That's the method of the way I review movies are pretty good. About 80% of that movie, no, 85 to 85% of that movie, I was no longer playing Minecraft. So
Awesome. Well, so what do you give it?
I'm really tempted to give it like a 4.5, but it's like between a 4 and a 4.5 for me.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah. It's just like it was great. I just wanted some more.
Well, Ultraman Rising.
Yeah.
Also a movie that takes place Japan, or with the Japan government or military having to do some fighting on the civil stage.
It's not during World War II anymore, but it is kaijus. And I don't know if you knew the backstory of it, but Godzilla, representation of the nuclear bomb, just the fears regarded with just the unknowingness of, I guess, human innovation. Like we didn't expect things like radiation poisoning to happen or long-term cancers or whatever. It's just the sheer destructive force of them. But Ultraman is definitely a much more light-hearted movie than Godzilla, I would say. It is, of course, also...
It's a fish out of water parenting story, is really what it is.
It's a surprising thing. The same way I would say that Unbroken is not your typical war movie, I would say Ultraman Rising is not your typical superhero movie as well. It just takes the superhero character, like this very like egotistic, Batman-esque, Superman-esque kind of character, and tasks him with raising essentially one of his enemies.
Yeah, it was really intriguing because when you talk about complexity of themes, this one had that for sure, because, you're supposed to not like the kaijus because they're destroying your cities. But here's Ultraman, who's the the savior of the people, kind of the symbolic savior, and he's got a different mindset. He's been trained by his father to respect the kaijus and to basically find balance, and whatever that exactly means, because that's a complex thought when it comes to things that are dangerous. And so it had complexity.
Yeah, it did in some way, and yeah, it definitely looked at the same way kind of Zamperini. And it honestly, it does feel kind of weird saying that Unbroken is like Ultraman Rising, knowing both movies. We do spend a lot of time with Ultraman outside of that like superhuman idea we have for those kind of characters. Like, he's not Ultraman for a lot of the movie. He's actually just the regular Ken Sato, I guess, very, very selfish, egotistical baseball star coming from the United States back to Japan and reconnecting with his roots a little bit, which is it's cool. As a person who did watch the movie really tired of superhero movies from like the Marvel and DC age, I did find this movie just a little bit refreshing in that it wasn't just fight scenes all the time. It was dealing with the human behind the mask. And of course, it was funny. I think.
Yeah, well, he was, even though does have a big ego. It's more the baseball player ego that he has.
Yeah.
He actually doesn't really have an ego when it comes to his identity as Ultraman. He's kind of it's a departure from most superheroes in that sense.
Yeah, because I think he kind of hated that it was kind of just passed on to him from his father. Like he just kind of saw it as like a job he had to do instead of wanted to do.
Yeah, that's actually part of his journey,
Yeah.
as we'll probably talk about a bit. He really wanted baseball first. He had to learn that he had more to do. He had more responsibility, and of course the addition of a child in his life, even though it was a kaiju child, also had to teach him responsibility, and that was quite the transformation for him because he was someone who was not kind of father material, and he turned into a good father.
I actually just I think my favorite scene was definitely the scene in the virtual reality baseball stadium where he's teaching his quote unquote adopted son how to play ball. I thought it was just adorable, and
It was great. Yeah,
it was a great mending of like his two sides of the character. But
and I mean they did a good job with tying his own responsibility issues or his flaws that he had with his own relationship with his father, because his father he perceived issues in his own father, like when his mom disappeared, he basically resented how he saw his dad's response in that situation, even though I think what came across was that his dad was actually engaged in helping, but he didn't see it. Is that how you saw it?
yeah, because I think it was the fact that he was. It was either because he's old or because the government was hunting him down. I forgot which way they went with it. But he could no longer be Ultraman for some reason, and he had to pass the role on to his son. The thing is, at the end of the movie, he does become Ultraman again in order to save his son. So, you know, he could have done it this entire time, I guess. Why not? I guess that's the one critique I did have with Ultraman Rising, is that it had a lot of moving pieces to kind of keep track of, and a lot of different characters that were being developed.
Yeah, and there was kind of a mishmash of themes going on. Like there were some really strong themes, but there were sometimes almost too crowded.
It was definitely a movie. It was brilliantly animated. I always touching that as the animation guy. It was very
definitely.
beautiful.
I mentioned that too. It was actually really unique because I only noticed it about a third of the way through. I saw the kind of the pencily or inky outlines more, and I was like, oh, this is like rotoscope style. Even though it wasn't rotoscoped, they kind of evoked that style. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. I can't remember if this is a full Spider-Verse style. Because I think they're not animating on twos, which for those who don't know, animating on twos is that effect to make it look like it's either stop motion or 2D animation. It gives it that kind of like more graphic novel-y feel.
Yeah.
But it is stylized. It does have that kind of almost Japanese cartoon come to life again, and that's why I did like just watching this as just a piece of animation, just to seeing the lighting effects and like the special effects of the laser beams and stuff coming out of the kaiju battles. It was great. The dark colors, like every single time, it's so typical of like villains, especially corporate villains in like animated movies. So just have that scene of the computer terminal room where everyone's lit up by the computer screens, and the guy and the main villain is on a walkway lit up by lights, and like everyone loves that scene. Well, at least I like that scene.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely wanted to heighten each scene, each setting with very dramatic arrangement.
Yeah,
they did a really good job with that.
yeah.
I felt like a few of the themes that were going on were being Ultraman isn't about fighting; it's about using your power to bring balance. So, kind of what we touched on earlier. It's not just about fighting; it's about thinking deeper and what is the balance that we're trying to find, or the underlying fight, more than just the surface level fight. And then there was the one about his progression from thinking baseball first, but he was meant to be Ultraman. So it's like finding that deeper purpose in your life, even if you might like doing something, but maybe there's another purpose there. So that was cool. And then also the one about with his father, it came across that sometimes you need to be away to protect, like because he resented his dad for being away when he perceived he should have been there, but there was that sentiment that his dad was actually working to protect in those times when he was away. So
Which I guess they do also touch on the protagonist and the antagonist. They're kind of perspectives on the kaiju as well, because both of them ended up losing a loved one to a kaiju. Ken Sato Ultraman loses.
there was some really good complexity with that too,
Yeah,
because both the antagonist and the protagonist both had suffered loss from the same source. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, tying it back into Zamperini, Japanese army, both in both films, both are shown as very, very ruthless and precise as well. The Japanese army wanted to go full eradication with the whole kaiju problem, whereas Ultraman wanted to go preservation.
And I mean, in a sense, like, if this is a Japanese film, then it's the writers going, the government is taking this stance, not specifically the Japanese government, but
The regular civilians in this movie were just more concerned about the fact they didn't want to get crushed by gigantic monster feet, which, fair enough. But I think the sentiment did lean more pro getting rid of the kaiju at the end. I don't think the movie really touched on the civilian opinion of kaijus. It was just Ultraman's change to liking them, from disliking them to liking them.
So I mean, there's probably lots that people could discuss about, like, what does that represent?
Yeah,
like, is there something, because obviously a culture in a literal situation, you have to deal with threats like that are causing destruction. But you can always ask the question, how to deal with these threats. Do we have to go with annihilation, or is there some other, like, we need to protect ourselves, but how can we do this in a way that's the best outcome?
So really, themes of forgiveness in both films that we kind of wish were touched on more, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those that's focused upon in a large degree.
Which I guess it's the fact of, I guess, both war and technically superhero movies, that it's the times of not peace that we're focusing on, and then the times of peace are kind of tacked on at the end as part of the resolution, which is kind of a shame. I don't think there are actually any. I can't think of one. I don't know if you can think of it, but a war or battle or like action movie like Ultraman Rising, where the midpoint is actually where the war ends and the character goes on to change. Because, like, technically, right, Forrest Gump, we were talking about that earlier before the podcast started, but Forrest Gump might be one of those ones where it's like the Vietnam War is like before it is like the first half of the second act, and like his life after Vietnam was the second act, the second half of the second act. Although I think in the runtime, the Vietnam War comes in really, really early. So I think it might not line up exactly with a midpoint. But
Yeah, I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen that one.
might be another movie we should watch for the podcast, because it's been a while since I've watched Forrest Gump as well. And I remember it being a really, really good movie.
Yeah, well, if you're a big Tom Hanks fan, then I be up for it.
I don't think I've watched a single Tom Hanks movie where I disliked his character. Like, even Polar Express, which is really, really pushing it on the how much I love Tom Hanks. I still ended up kind of okay with it. Was there anything else you wanted to say on Ultraman Rising?
Basically, I was just going to mention a few, like, there were a few continuity things that came up, like how the baby's attack scream got lost kind of partway through. Like, at first, whenever it would scream, it would let out this burst.
Oh, yeah.
And then that just kind of went away. And, like, especially when they set its broken arm, her broken arm, that was like, it would have let out a big blast of a scream there. And then that pupil stage kind of came out of nowhere. It wasn't really set up, and why they knew that the baby would want to lead them to Kaiju Island, like, that was never really explained, and didn't really kind of make sense totally, because it was like with its mother now, so why is it all of a sudden leading its mother back home? Kind of odd. But those are just some minor continuity things. All in all, like, it was a really a well done movie. I enjoyed it, and I was also going to give it a 4.5.
Hey, pretty good, dude. Pretty solid movies recommended today. I guess to round it off, because I wanted to probably set this up for a future podcast. In CGI animation, like the 3D, which this was, I've always found that the storytelling is usually not as good as 2D animation. And, like, you know, when I was watching it, yeah, like, I did find that the plot was a little bit messy, which is why I probably only gave that a 4, in my personal opinion, despite it being really, really beautiful. But I always thought that it was because because CGI was just so much more easier and efficient to make than 2D animation. So that when it comes to a 2D movie, the story has to be so locked down to be so particularly precise, because a reshoot in a 2D animation is like 3 extra weeks of like just drawing. Whereas CGI is just like, oh, we'll just add in some more assets and just move these guys around. I definitely want to talk about that more in a future podcast, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good discussion, yeah. Oh, and I should mention, I liked the nice touches that it had. The baby having a crushed car for, like, a stuffed animal. And
yeah. It was like it was like a Lamborghini that was from
that was that. And the touch that they made of him playing for the Giants. I only noticed that halfway through. But that was like a really intentional reference that he plays for the Giants, and he is a Giant.
Yeah, that's deliberate, dude. Regardless, it was a genuinely fun movie to watch. It was a genuinely beautiful movie to watch, and I did enjoy it as well. Yeah, I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode.
Yeah, I think that wraps up episode 8. Hopefully everyone out there is enjoying the year 2025, as I assume it is when this comes out.
I hope the new year has brought you great joy. I hope everyone's still doing fine. Hopefully it'd be a miracle if the wars in the current world have ended. But if not, baseball is a great thing to watch in the meantime, as Ultraman Rising has proven.
There you go. Or whatever it is you choose to focus on. Hopefully this brightened your day. That's it for episode 8. See you next time.
Jay and Dave signing off then. And that's a wrap. Special thanks to Niranj, who made the intro and outro music for this podcast. You can find him on Instagram at his handle @NiranjD. That is @NIRANJD on Instagram.